started here. We're going to get our PowerPoint shared for you all here today. So bear with us as we get that going, and then we will get started here very shortly. To see some faces on the screen. Hi, everybody. Thank you. I'm just scrolling through the attendees list here to make sure I've got everybody from the city staff that will be a part of this panel today. Bear with me. Hi, Susan. Thank you for joining us. And Gina, Akbar, Peter. I see Bill. John, thank you. Chief and Dia, good to see you today, sir. And I believe waiting for Assistant City Attorney Andy Higland. I was on mute. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Estelle Husa. I am your Economic Development Manager for the City of Ventura. I would kindly ask that you please put yourself on mute as we venture through this informational session today. It is great to see so many people joining us here. Just to be able to move through our topics, and so we don't have any disruption with any feedback. Now, I am pleased today to be joined by key members of city staff and the Chamber of Commerce, and we welcome our economic development partners and members from our broker, business, and residential community here today. I'm hoping to start a bit on a little personal note. This was about 3 years ago, this very time period in April, that I was facing the decision to leave my prior employer and come work for the city. It was a big decision for me and my family. And some of you may or may not know that I grew up here. I'm a fourth generation Ventura native. And when I grew up, Ventura was not a place that me or my friends saw as an opportunity for our future. It was a place where we would maybe come back and visit our parents when they got older. In 2002, after 2 state championship titles at Ventura College for the women's basketball team, I moved away. I went to college and started my career. In 2014, I came back and saw what Ventura was evolving into. I saw the investment and growth of businesses in our city. And when looking at this job in 2018, I was really excited to think that I could help create a future where my kids did not grow up thinking that they had to leave for opportunity, and that it could be here. And it was that reason why I took this job. And I share that because I know many of you share that same vision. And that is also what motivates you to keep at it here in the city. And I say keep at it because I've heard from you. I've heard from you that doing business in Ventura is not easy. I've heard you time and time again that the process is challenging and frustrating. There's no clarity or consistency, and that those two detriments add a burden of cost and time that cripples investment into our city. In 2019, we started this engagement session with you all as we were working on the matrix report. In 2020, we worked through COVID, and I am pleased now to resume what we hope to be continued series of these informational summit sessions to share and dialogue with you, our business community, on what we are doing to address and improve our service to you. Now, before we begin, with the staff panel, I would like to ask Stephanie Caldwell, President and CEO of the Chamber of Commerce, to share a few words. Stephanie and her team represent over 700 businesses in our city and over 25,000 employees. Stephanie and her team provide a key service to our businesses through networking, marketing, advocacy, and business support. The Chamber is a key economic development partner, and I am very grateful for Stephanie, her board, and all their members. Stephanie.
Good morning. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here this morning. I know it's been some time since we've all met, and certainly I wish it could be in person, and hopefully we can meet in person soon. Today, the city and some of the senior management will be sharing some key updates of important work that the city has been doing in a variety of areas. And one of them will be in regards to the emergency streamlining ordinance. And for those of you who are not familiar, this ordinance reflects some procedural policy adjustments that were recommended in the matrix report. The emergency streamlining ordinance was brought forward to help mitigate some of the challenges of the COVID pandemic. And this ordinance has been in place for nearly a year, and by all accounts, it's been successful in doing exactly what it set out to do. We've heard your frustration, as Estelle mentioned, and many, many stories, and know that we in Ventura get fired often before we get hired because of our difficult reputation. And these concerns have been systemic for decades. First identified more than 20 years ago in the Zucker report, and more recently in the Matrix report. We have an opportunity to continue to make changes and work toward a positive permanent solution. But that's going to take some additional time. The extension of the emergency streamline ordinance is critical to keep this process moving forward. There are many additional changes to process and procedure policy that need to happen, but this is a first step, and we should not allow it to go backward. Here's what you can do to help. This emergency streamline ordinance will come back to the council on April 26th. We need this community on this call to come out and speak on how it can impact you and your business, your clients, and tell those stories. The council needs to see your faces and hear your stories. I'll put my information in the chat, or Estelle can send it out. If you're interested and would like to speak or would like more information on this, please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Now, before I introduce our panel, I would like to inform the viewers of a few things. This meeting is being recorded. The recording, along with the presentation, will be posted to our website, as well as shared through our economic development partner. In the chat, a link to our economic development newsletter for you to join and subscribe if you have not done so already, as well as some other links throughout the presentation. This is our first development summit in over a year and a half, almost, and our first time virtually, so bear with us as we work through this medium. As Stephanie mentioned, we would have preferred to do this in person, and we will look forward to having that opportunity, hopefully sometime in this year. We do invite attendees to post questions into the chat, and at the conclusion of the presentation, it is our aim to answer those questions as they are received. For those questions that do not get answered during the live session, we will work with staff to have those questions answered and posted as well. I anticipate that we would be able to have this up on our website as early as early next week, Monday. Next slide, please. All right, our panel today includes Assistant City Manager Akbar Alikhan, Assistant City Attorney Andy Hagelin, our Fire Chief Dave Ndaya, Ventura Water General Manager Ms. Susan Rungren, our Public Works Director Phil Nelson, our Community Development Director Peter Gilli, and myself. Again, I'm going to ask everybody if you could please mute yourself if you are not part of the panel or part of the presentation, so we do not receive any of that feedback. Appreciate that. Next slide, please. All right. Today's agenda is going to include updates from Susan Rungren, who will share some information related to the water rates, water master plan. We will hear from Phil Nelson on relevant changes to stormwater maps, and Peter Gilli on general plan and historic survey updates. To conclude, Akbar will provide some updates to our overall process improvements and streamlining efforts. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Susan Rungren. Susan, next slide, please. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Estelle. And good morning, everyone. Glad to be here. I wanted to talk a little bit about what we're doing for the rate study. I'll begin with that and then talk a little bit about the water and wastewater master plans. So about every 5 years, we do a rate study, and this is completed to make sure that we provide our customers with reliable water and wastewater services. Staff's worked over the past year with the Water Commission, our financial experts, and other city departments on the rate study. Rates help really to pay for everyday operation and maintenance, and then also our capital improvement projects that we go through with our Public Works Department and Finance Department. One of the things that people ask about is, well, why do we need to do this now? We actually haven't raised rates since 2017, and the reason for that, we were actually working on a rate study at the time with the Thomas Fire, and due to the Thomas Fire, obviously other things became up. So we're now going back to this rate study. We're going through Water Commission, as I mentioned, City Council. One of the things we do need to do is we have aging infrastructure. As many of you know, the city is pretty old. We have failing infrastructure. We have costly repairs and compliance issues if we don't raise our rates and continue. We have regulatory requirements. We have legal fees and fines that come up if we don't meet our legal requirements and our regulatory requirements. We're improving our water quality. With the projects we have in our CIP, we're going to complete those, and rather than have expensive upgrades to existing facilities. We also have issues with existing and future water supplies. Without investment, we would have higher future rates, economic fallout, and potentially a build-in moratorium. Next slide. So what are the rate impacts? One of the things we've been doing is going to many community council meetings, other meetings, as well as we met with the chamber. And we're trying to be very transparent to make sure everyone understands what's happening like. So for the average 900 cubic feet per month, what we're looking at is a 7% annually for water, annually for wastewater increases. What that means is $7.76 on the average monthly increase on an annual basis over 5 years. And again, this is for people who use 900 cubic feet per month. So if you use more, your costs will go up. If you use less, they won't go up as much. Next slide. We wanted to give you some examples also of what happens, for instance, if you have small retail, if you use it around 400 cubic feet per month, and with a 1-inch meter, your rates will go up around almost $6. One thing I do want to mention too is right now we do bi-monthly rates or bi-monthly bill. And someone needs to be muted, sorry. So right now we do bi-monthly billing. We're going to go to monthly billing. So everything I'm showing you today is a monthly bill. Again, so there's small retail. And then if you look at multifamily residential, we looked at, say you have 10 units, you use 400 cubic feet per month with a 2-inch meter, that rate will be about $26 per month increase. And then if you look at a restaurant, which about 1,500 square feet for 400 cubic feet per month, and a 2-inch meter, about $27 per month increase. So we wanted to give you some examples. Next slide. And next slide, please. All right, one of the things that we do when we look at what's happening happening with our operation and maintenance, but also with our operation and maintenance, but our infrastructure. One of the things we've done is master plan updates are now underway. Our last water and wastewater master plans were completed in 2011. We did get budget the last year, and so we have council approval now for consultant agreements, one for our water master plan and one for our wastewater master plan. We anticipate these being updated at the end of this fiscal year, or the end of this annual calendar year. Next slide. Looks like it's taking a little time for the next slide here. And I think maybe, Carrie, you doing this slide, there you go, sorry. So some of the main tasks and objectives for the master plans, we're looking to update our hydraulic models. We're also doing condition assessments of our existing facilities. We're evaluating our design criteria of what's been happening in our system. We're doing water quality analysis, analyzing the system operations to optimize our efficiencies, looking at system risk and redundancies. With all this, we're identifying and prioritizing our capital projects. Some of the things that we've found since the last master plan, as you might understand, with water conservation, we actually have water demands that are less. They've actually been reduced. And then what's happened to the wastewater system, because there's not as much water going through, we have reduction in our wastewater system, but that also means more buildup in our wastewater system, more cleaning. And so what we're doing with these master plan updates, it's going to provide really development with a better idea of where we have deficiencies, how we can work together to prioritize capital projects. We do water and sewer studies, as many of you know. This is going to help us to, again, better identify and work on those water and sewer studies, where we can look at development as a whole. Our planning department, as many of you know, is going through a general plan. We look at where development is taking place, where corridors are, or maybe they're expanding 10%, or 20%. We can put those in percent. We can put those into our master plans to look at future, and so we can always, and capacity issues, so we can all work to needs, make sure that if 3 or 4 development issues, so we can have them also because we can see if that's in our seat, that we can all take a share in that. Next slide. And I'll turn it over.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Susan. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Susan. Glad to be here. I'm glad to be both dealing with stormwater. I wanted to talk about both dealing with changes in the floodplain management, stormwater management. First are some changes in the floodplain management. I've got 4 items there you can see on the screen. The California mapping of mouthful. It's a project that FEMA is initiated, been working on, and one of the things it produced was a new special flood hazard area designated as a V zone along the coastline in Ventura. And this new V zone impacts to the neighborhood. The V zone will also impact any new construction along the coastline in Ventura, to include the pier and the promenade area. And I know that are planned for that area. And I make this point just so that as you're developing your projects, you're aware that that new V zone exists and will require some additional analysis for a floodplain on those projects. The second item deals with the Ventura River. It's protected on the west side along the Ventura River by a levee system that's managed by the Ventura County Watershed Protection District. At this time, the levee is not certified, and FEMA is initiating a levee analysis and mapping project known as a LAMP. and that will map the floodplain without the levee, as if the levee did not exist. At this time, the development between the existing levee and the Ventura Avenue will have to conform to the FEMA requirements for being within a special flood hazard area or an A zone. Now we're going to be working with FEMA to try to change those designations or to with the county as well on getting the levee certified. But in the meantime, those are the changes in that area that we're going to have to make sure we consider as we go through development. On the other side, the Santa Clara River, both the city of Ventura and the city of Oxnard have designed and are constructing new levees to go along the Santa Clara River. And Ventura's levee will start and end at Johnson Drive, start at the end of it, Johnson Drive, and extend through the Auto Center area into the Buenaventura Golf Course. This levee system will contain the Santa Clara River and reduce the current flood hazard, special flood hazard area within the city of Ventura, which will make that area around the Olivas Park Drive available for development. I don't have a timeline yet on when the construction of that levee will occur, but the design is nearly complete and we hope to be constructing in the not too distant future. And then finally, the last item on floodplain that I want to mention are the local floodplain areas. We have 7 local floodplain areas along the south-facing hillsides that travel down to the barrancas and migrate through the city towards the Pacific Ocean or towards the Santa Clara River. Many of these barrancas are Ventura County Watershed Protection District redline channels that have both city and county interests. And many of the barrancas are older farmer channels and are not developed for 100-year storm events, which leads to localized areas of flooding hazards. So many of these areas are identified by modeling through Watershed Protection District or the City of Ventura or by the developer when a project has been proposed. So as you're developing along those barrancas, just want you to be aware of that there will be likely some additional modeling that's required just because of the potential flood hazards that I mentioned. If you would like to get more information on any of these items or anything relative to floodplain, please contact Brad Starr at the number and email you can see on your screen. Brad's not in this week, but he will be back Monday. So if you've got any questions, please feel free to reach out to him then. Next slide, please. The other item in terms of stormwater is stormwater quality or stormwater treatment requirements. The current requirements are that either stormwater is retained on site or that before it leaves the site, it goes through some sort of a treatment control. We're looking for those controls to be proposed during conceptual design and then of course also during the formal project submittal. But it's important during conceptual design, just as a reminder, to include those controls so that they've been provided for, because they usually require space to do, they've been provided for within the project. Dealing with them later, after or during the formal process will just have impacts to the project and delays as those treatment controls then have to be incorporated into the project. And then also as a reminder that those controls are required to be maintained by the current property owner for the life of the project, the life of the controls. So those requirements currently exist. We just often see in projects they're not fully provided for. So just wanted to offer that as a reminder. There is a change coming up, however. I think you're probably all aware that we have a new MS4 permit that's about to be issued. It looks like now it will probably be issued in June, most likely. It has a number of changes, but the biggest one that will have an impact on development is going back to those treatment controls. Currently, there are certain thresholds that have to be reached before they're required on a project. And we foresee that those thresholds may be lowered. And there may be different thresholds for different project types. So just mentioning that now, that's not taken in effect. We're still working with the board and trying to get the permit, in a form that really works well for us in Ventura County. But wanted to put that out there that this is likely going to change in June. For other information, this topic I'm covering is quite large. I can't possibly cover it all at this meeting. But if you'd like more information, the technical guidance manual that the county publishes, Watershed Protection District, can be seen at the link that I have on the screen. And then on our staff in Public Works, Peter Schellenbarger can help you with any other questions you might have. And you can reach him at the email that's shown on the screen. Next slide, please. That, I'd like to turn it over to Peter Gilli, our Community Development Director.
Thank you very much, Phil. I'm going to give quick updates on the general plan, housing element, and our historic survey process. Starting with the general plan, I mean, this is really going to be the guiding document for the future of the community. Issues of land use, climate resiliency, mobility, economic development, all are going to be part of the document and more. We are contracting with Ramey & Associates, who is leading a consultant team to support our efforts. At this point, the best source of information, if you're interested in the general plan update, is the website planventura.com. We are still really early in the process. The second image shows the kind of 6 major steps that we have to go through on the general plan. We're currently in the second one, which is the part on the visioning of what the future should be. The first community workshop is planned for the end of this month, April 29th. It is going to be virtual. And the quality of the document of the general plan itself is going to be dependent on the level of participation we get from the entire community. So please be involved, ask the questions you have, make the points that you have of what you think we need to be considering for the next 15 to 30 years in the community, and stay involved. After the visioning, we will go into some of the meatier aspects of the development of the plan, and that is the creation of potential land use alternatives. This is literally coming up with ways that the community might physically grow and change over time. The idea is to come up with multiple alternatives so that the community can weigh in and talk about the pros and cons of each. And then eventually City Council will give us direction on which of those alternatives they want the general plan to be built around. So as I said, very important to be involved. We do want to hear from all of you. One question that just came up, how many workshops are proposed? There are several, pretty much at least one at every stage, every circle on the screen. And there's a lot more information on the website about how to be involved. There are workshops. There are GPAC meetings. There are public hearings that are going to happen at Planning Commission and Council. And if we stay on the track we currently are, there's going to be in-person and pop-up meetings out in the community as well. So there's going to be a lot of engagement. We are on track for adoption of the plan in 2023, which was always the intention when the project started. Next slide. The housing element is technically part of the general plan, but it has separate state mandates and separate timelines. The housing element is actually the only part of the general plan that we have to send to the state and they have to approve it. It is also on an 8-year cycle, whereas as the general plan is generally recommended to be updated every 15 years, but not required. So there are state mandates involved with the housing element. We are required to adopt the housing element in 2021. I put that in quotes because there is a grace period that allows us to go into early 2022. But if the housing element is not adopted in 2021, then there are additional laws that the housing element will have to address that go into effect in 2022. So we are seeking to have it adopted in 2021. As part of the housing element, the state assigns the SCAG, our Southern California regional government, a number of units that SCAG then has to assign to each organization in the area. SCAG got a number in, I believe, over 1 million units they had to plan for. They came up with a formula, and the portion that Ventura has received is 5,300 5,300 units. Because of the timeline associated with the housing element being due before we will be done with our general plan, and the fact that the state has not extended the deadline on the housing element despite the pandemic, we are going to be using the land use designations of the 2005 general plan to identify the sites where the 5,000 units can be located. As many of you know, the general plan sets forth how much a property could be developed as. And there are a lot of properties that have development potential over what is there. So that's what we mean by we're going to be using the 2005 general plan. There are already properties in the city that allow more housing units than they currently have. The 2021 housing element will also be updating the housing policies based on new state laws as well. Then we will amend the housing element when the new general plan is adopted in 2023 to make sure that the general plan and the housing element are consistent. Next slide, please. The last topic I'm going to cover is historic preservation. In 2019, Council approved a contract with a consultant to do a historic context statement for the city and a historic survey of the whole city. Context statement is a very key part of, key tool for how the city will determine whether an individual structure or property has historic merit. It's not just automatic that if you're over a certain age, you are automatically going to be a resource. Context statement will help inform the Historic Preservation Committee on what a structure or property will have to have in order to qualify. So it's an important document. The draft is going to the HPC next week. If you have interest in this document, please email me. I will put my email into the chat. We can email you a PDF of the document. You can also go to our website and look up the agenda for the HPC meeting on the 22nd and get the report that way as well. It is a hefty report. It's 300 pages. So it is a detailed walkthrough of the history of Ventura. It's a very interesting read. As I said, the draft is going to HPC for comments. The final will eventually go to HPC later this year, where HPC will make a recommendation to the City Council, and the City Council will take the final action on the document. Once Council adopts this context statement, then the citywide survey would begin, because the survey is going to be based on what is in the context statement. The completion of the survey is expected to occur in late 2022. And I believe at this point, I'm handing it off to Akbar Alikhan, Assistant City Manager.
All right, thanks, Peter. Next slide, please. Most of you will recall back in November 2019, the City Council adopted this thing called the Matrix Report. In fact, I know several of you were actually part of the fact-finding during the Matrix Report. It included 57 recommendations on how we can improve our process for people like yourself who are submitting an application to the city. Essentially, it's a blueprint about how we can move forward. There were 3 broad categories in which the recommendations fell under: process, technology, and staffing. And really the 3 broad themes that came out of the report were clarity, essentially what is the process, certainty, will I get an answer in a reasonable amount of time, and then third is cost, and that is just what will this cost me in terms of time or the necessary public improvements that I might need to make. As far as where we're at today, we're roughly 50% of the way through the Matrix Report punch list. We still got a long ways to go, and I will say the Matrix Report is kind of the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more behind it that we need to do in terms of improving our internal processes, but it is a great start. One of the key improvements regarding technology is right around the corner. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. We can go to the next slide, please. If you've seen the screen, you may recognize that it's essentially the receiving portal in which we get applications today. If you were to go downstairs to the first floor of City Hall, you would see a lot of rolled up plan sets that are less frequently used nowadays because we have gone digital overnight. And when you do that, you can imagine that there's some jarring and some growing pains, as you might imagine. But we did that, of course, due to the COVID shutdown about a year ago. And this portal was clunky at first. We have since refined it. It's meant to be an interim step. It's not meant to be permanent. The full system that we have being set up right now is ready to go live probably by the end of June of 2021. And we're excited to launch that. That system is called Energov. We currently have a version of Energov, but it's an antiquated version of it. The new Energov system will be a welcome change, not only for our customers, but for internal staff and how we communicate about your project. So the next slide, please. So this is the, I won't call this the final interface, but it's a proposed interface of what the new Energov system will look like from the customer side. If it looks simple, it's because it is simple. I mean, there's 6 buttons on the screen, but really from here, you can do everything that you might need to do. You can look at our development map. You can apply for a permit. You can search any public records you need to search for on a particular property. Schedule an inspection, pay an invoice. All that really is accessible at the click of a button here. Well, while this looks simple on screen, I promise you there's a lot of machinery going on behind the scenes that's not so simple. And city staff has really been diligently working to make sure that that gets set up properly. The challenge for us is, and I'll talk about this on the next slide, if we can flip to the next one. As you're building that machinery, that detracts from work that otherwise needs to get done. And I'm going to go through some of the challenges that we are facing today. The first is just simply volume. We've gotten an uptick in the amount of applications that we've received. Even in a non-COVID environment at a full staffing levels, this would have been a pretty trying time for our staff and just being able to work through the sheer workload that has come our way in a rather short amount of time. The second issue is this Energov implementation I just spoke about. We've had to divert staff resources away from their day-to-day functions in order to build the new system. And to borrow a metaphor that Peter often uses is we're fixing the boat while rowing it at the same time. The third one is staffing vacancies. We've had several planners that have moved on or just we've actually created a couple new positions, and so we have recognized the need for additional planning staff. We just need to get them in the door. And then third or fourth is this remote work infrastructure. We obviously, like many cities throughout the county, sent staff home to work from home and gave them the devices to do so to be effective. However, the infrastructure, while they're able to be effective from home, the infrastructure is not quite there to support an ideal work environment when you consider these giant plan sets that need to be downloaded and re-uploaded as you make changes to a digital plan set. I mean, these are giant files, and when you consider the pinch points from a data perspective on our internet bandwidth, it's less than ideal. We are a server-based organization today, meaning all the files that we work off of are generally stored physically at City Hall in the basement of our 505 building, and that's how we access our files. And when I wouldn't say we are much of a cloud-based organization yet, and because of that, it does create some pinch points when it comes to accessing data. So what we're doing to address that is bringing some key staff back to City Hall now that some of the COVID numbers are subsiding, creating a safe environment to return to their desks and better access that data that they need access to serve you all in a timely manner. I'm going to actually go backwards on this list to discuss some of the solutions we've devised to each of these problems I just named. Going back to the staffing vacancies, we are recruiting for some of those planners. I will go so far as to say, if you've done work in other cities and there's planners that you feel are been very responsive and may be interested in working for the City of Ventura, give them a gentle nudge and remind them that the City of Ventura is looking for qualified applicants. Secondly, we created a new position called the Permit Services Supervisor. This would be a person to oversee this new group that we devised called the Permit Services. We created this group out of existing staff. This supervisor would be a new position, though, to oversee that operation. And I expect this person will probably be on speed dial for most of you as you have to track down maybe where your application might be. Hopefully that's not the case when the new InterGov system is live. You can actually track your application online. Again, going further to the left, the InterGov implementation, yes, we have diverted staff from their day-to-day functions, but we have formed or are in the process of forming a new team to support that InterGov implementation. And we do see the light at the end of the tunnel. That phase one is coming to completion here in a couple short months. So we will see an improvement very soon. And then as far as the application volume, we're bringing on 2 new full-time techs to replace temporary contract techs. We have been using temporary help for some time. As part of our proposed budget going to City Council later this month, we do have a proposal to bring 2 new full-time techs on board permanently, just given our workload. That made the most sense. So I'll be completely frank with this group. We are not at a point that I'm satisfied with today. Because of the challenges that we've had that are on screen here, the response times have been lacking, and I'll be the first to admit that. But you have a lot of hardworking staff who are genuinely trying to do their best to work with the system that they have been given. But what I do see is hope very soon around the corner to turn this around in consideration of some of the solutions that I've shown on screen and shared with you and the new InterGov system coming online. Let's go to the next slide, please. All right, so at the outset of this meeting, there was a mention of the emergency streamlining ordinance. We proposed this to City Council in 2020, so almost a year ago. It was set for a 1-year time frame, and we'll be going back to City Council with a recommendation to extend this for 1 more year. If anyone's not familiar with the emergency streamlining ordinance, I'll tell you just kind of the effects of it. It has reduced processing time. Really, the bang for the buck comes at the smaller type of projects. We save about 25% for those small projects. For large scale projects, we do have a time savings of roughly 5 to 10%. It preserved the use of the DRC and HPC as recommending bodies only. It did not do away with those committees. It simply made them recommending bodies with the final action done by the Planning Commission. We've expanded public notification. We really have leveraged our community councils in helping to get the word out to interested residents who may have concerns or inquiries about a project, and can get the word to the project owners and their designers at a stage when they are still willing and able to make changes, rather than at a hearing when they have a fully baked product. And I'll say, from staff's estimation, the formula has been successful. We're seeing good results. We're 1 year in, and the initial results have been promising. The biggest benefit, though, and that's something that gets overlooked, is it does save staff time. And because we are able to save staff on streamlining, we have staff capacity then for other tasks. And so much of what small business really relies on, and residents as well, are not necessarily the big things that go to public hearings. It's really the small day-to-day stuff, getting the ability to pick up the phone and get a live body on the other end, the ability to, walk into City Hall when we're able to do so again, and see a person and not have to wait around all morning waiting in line. But being able to get through public hearings a little bit faster means we can do more of the day-to-day stuff that you all rely on. In terms of where we're going next with the emergency streamlining ordinance, as I said, we'll be going back to City Council with a recommendation to extend this 1 more year, and that is on April 26th at the City Council meeting. If that is approved, we will be working on a permanent ordinance, and that is a city council goal that was adopted. With the idea there, we're going to take lessons that we learned from the temporary trial and then apply them to a permanent ordinance that we would then put in front of the city council later in the year. And that concludes my slides, and I believe the end of the slide deck. Estelle.
Great. Great, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Akbar, and thank you to our panelists, Susan, Phil, and Peter, for joining us today and presenting this great content. Okay, we have some questions in the queue and in the chat box that I'm going to kind of work through. Some have been being answered through the chat, so we'll work on that. We'll work through that together. Please feel free to drop a chat into the box if you'd like, and we'll have about 15 minutes to work through some of these questions. A question was first asked by Stephanie at the Chamber of Commerce. Will there be any updates to net zero now that we have a project for Ventura Water Pier and the state water tie-in? Additionally, from Bill, we received a question around why doesn't Ventura Water do a better job explaining net zero concerning new development? I'm going to allow Akbar, Alikhan, and Susan Rungren to share a little bit. There's some context there in the chat, but I'll allow them to share that verbally as well on what happened to net zero.
Yeah, I can start. We did update the water demand factors. Those were basically at the time when net zero was approved. We did not have detailed information on, for instance, a restaurant versus a realtor, a retail. So we've looked at the square footage. We've been able to look back into our water billing information. So we've made those demand factors more realistic to what's happening today, especially with conservation. As far as the net zero fee, we are working on updating that in the next few months. We have also heard the question from many people about, well, how come the city keeps developing? We've conserved water, what's happening with that? So we have done a FAQ sheet on our website, on Ventura Water website, as well as I believe the city website. And again, the city as a whole, we're working to make sure we get that message out, to make sure people understand development is paying a net zero fee. They're paying for water supply as they come in. So we'll try to do a better job of that. Thank you for that comment.
And I don't have much to add other than to say regarding water rates to the various community councils twice, actually, and the different Rotary clubs. This question comes up quite a bit, and we have been very forthcoming with that response is new construction pays for new water or pays for their share of new water. You know, generally, as you all know, as people who have paid a net zero fee perhaps in the past, yeah, it is a hefty chunk of change. And what that does show is it shows residents that they are not necessarily subsidizing your project in any way for water availability. So we have been very forthcoming with that. And as Susan said, it's on the various different websites under FAQ.
An additional question regarding net zero was, do we anticipate the demand factors or the fees to be reduced or increased?
So we don't know that answer yet. We're working on that right now to see. And one thing I would like to mention too, what I try to let people know, what they see out there today is a lot of construction. They don't understand or realize that many of these projects have been sitting in the queue for 10 years or more. They've been entitled. Obviously, people aren't going to, build unless there's a demand, unless the economy is good. So that's one thing we can probably do a better job of, is letting people know, many of these projects have been on the books. So you see a lot of construction right now. That just happens to be what's happening at this time.
Thank you, Susan. Another question from Bill regarding the new MS4 permit. Do the new standards take effect on the date certain, or are you grandfathered into your approval date? Phil dropped a note here in the chat that we believe the project would be governed by the MS4 permit in effect at the time the project was approved, though we advise you to reach out to Peter Schellenberg for definitive answers. I will actually go ahead and do that, and when we do a summary of the questions and answers, we will make sure to have that answer from Peter provided to the group here. Moving down to new questions. Sorry, kind of scrolling through. Okay. Okay, there's another question from Bill. It seems like there is a lot of confusion in the community between the Emergency Streamlining Ordinance and the Housing Accountability Act. I don't believe any housing development have used Emergency Streamlining Ordinance. Changes concerning review process have been due to the Housing Accountability Act. Seems like that should be explained in the staff report. Peter, you be able to take this?
Yeah, I put a response in the chat as well. Housing projects have used the Emergency Streamlining Ordinance. I think the point that Bill might be making is the topics that the residents are most upset, concerned residents about the projects are most upset about are more about the state's limiting of local authority to what we can do with those projects. So I think I agree with that point, that the Housing Accountability Act limits what a city can do with a housing project. If the general plan says a site can have 100 units and a project comes in proposing 100 or fewer units, we are basically in a position where the city has to approve those number of units. The streamlining ordinance, though, has been used because DRC would normally make an approval action on a design, and then the permit part would go to another hearing. So it's piecemealed out, and the streamlining has been used to make it so that the final action, a comprehensive final action, occurs at the last hearing. Because I'm involved with this all the time, this makes sense to me, but I understand to a lot of people who aren't in, this isn't their life, it's not as clear, but emergency streamlining has applied to housing projects, but the complaints we are getting from residents about these housing projects are really more about the Housing Accountability Act and what the state has required.
Thank you, Peter. And here we have from Stephanie Caldwell, we are hearing about significant delays in permit services. What is happening there and what is being done to fix it? I think Akbar can take this.
Yeah, I'll start, and if Peter has anything to add, he can add whatever I leave out. But that one position I mentioned a couple slides back on the permit services supervisor, that will make a huge deal, and I don't want to oversell it either. I mean, this is a new group that we have formed because generally in the past, you as the applicant have had to hop around the different divisions to talk to each individual group. And what me and the team have really devised is this system where, well, let's bring the people who generally have answered phones in 8 different places and bring them together and really create a common knowledge base. And the fact of the matter is, we get the same 15 to 20 questions 90% of the time. It's like, well, okay, well, let's put together that knowledge base, as I said, get them educated on how to properly and appropriately respond to those common questions. And then that way they're kind of the first line to be able to answer questions quickly before seeking the help of an expert if they need to. But that group really requires some coordination. And if there was any flaw in our line of thinking, I think it had to do with, well, we really needed a resource to help manage it. And that's what we have. We really discovered that, I think, last summer, and that is why we are in the process of recruiting for that position. So I'm excited to bring that person on board. I was half joking when I said you'd want to have them on speed dial, but they will be a great resource for all of you really to lean on. But Peter, is there anything else I left out that you would want to add?
Yeah, I think I would add on something else you mentioned in your section of the slides, that when the surge hit, we pulled all the techs, or we shifted all the techs to work at home. And so, as Akbar mentioned, kind of the back and forth with downloads and uploads. Downloads for a lot of people, depending on your internet connection, are relatively strong. Uploads, again, unless you have fiber, not strong. So For our employee safety, we did that. Now we're bringing them back. And we acknowledge that when the techs started working at home, the turnarounds got worse. November and December, our turnarounds were better than January, February, and March. So I think the combination of many of these things that we're working on is going to get us back on the right track, as well as the intergov and converting temporary contract spots into full-time employees who should have more ownership and be more part of the team as a staff person as opposed to a contract employee.
Thank you, Peter. I would also add to that, and thank you for the question, Stephanie. Another thing that we are doing to address is to communicate that out. We have devised kind of a service level statement that our staff will be sharing, because in the current state as of today, we are experiencing extreme high number volumes of applications coming into the city. In the last month of March, we received over 3,000 calls, 1,000 new permit applications, of which only 300 were over the counter, so meaning over 700 then have to get routed and processed. We completed over 1,000 inspections, and this is with a smaller staff in that permit services area, as well as our planning staff. And as we mentioned, we do have some vacancies right now. And so with all of that, it's cumulative to what we're dealing with right now in terms of response times that you may be experiencing. We appreciate your patience in this, and we are working to improve that numerical metric on which we have our response times to you. Thank you. Okay, I don't see any more questions, and we are towards the end of our informational summit here today. I just want to say one more thing that popped in. Please provide the general plan update community workshop link when available. We certainly will. And as I mentioned earlier at the onset of this, we will be sharing this recording that has taken place, as well as the presentation and a summary of the questions and answers on our website, as well as shared through our ED newsletter. Please join that if you are not a current subscriber. Thank you to the panelists for joining us today. Thank you for the staff that joined as well. Thank you to our council members. I saw you pop in as well, Councilmember Johnson and Mayor Rubalcava. Thank you. I hope I didn't miss any others. And to all of our residents, our brokers, and our businesses joining us here today, we look forward to continuing these informational summits to you throughout the year. And I look forward to doing this again in person one day shortly. With that, I invite you all to have a lovely day. Please reach out with any questions, and I look forward to seeing you all soon. Have a good day, folks. Cheers. Bye-bye.